Hey, Spaceloth here with another Factorio tutorial. This one is on oil planning and management. This is actually a topic that it took me a long time to wrap my head around for Factorio. It's the thing that gave me the most trouble for the longest time. And throughout the course of sort of preparing this this tutorial, I really got a better understanding of it while creating the tutorial, and the tutorial has actually changed many times because as I made it, I understood it better, and so I had to update the tutorial and change things. So I think this will be pretty valuable if you're getting stuck on oil. Hopefully this will bring some clarity to it, and we'll see. Let me jump right into the topics we're going to be covering. First, I'm going to focus on taking the mystery out of oil. And this will be sort of a bird's eye view of why is oil important in Factorio. What's the focus of building oil? And it may be different from what you think. It may be exactly what you think. We'll see. After that, we'll get into some discussion of buffers and planning, and then some recommended setups, and then finally, if you want to do some calculations on your own, I'll get into a set of numbers that might help you do that. But first, let's take the mystery out of oil. And here you can see these first two things right here. Oil is advanced circuits and batteries. Batteries are a secondary objective. Really, advanced circuits are your primary focus for oil. And there's a couple of reasons why these two things together are pretty much your sole focus when you're doing oil. You could take it a step further and say, blue science, but really advanced circuits and batteries are what you're thinking about when you're planning and building your oil. And everything else that oil creates is basically a free byproduct. Not much thought has to go into the rest. So when you think oil, really think red circuits. Let's get into a few numbers and see why. What we have here, let me quickly explain how this works. Here we have products that use batteries. Here we have products that use red circuits. And then how many batteries are required to create an accumulator? 5. And then the next column is how many accumulators might we need in a total game. I said 700 perhaps. Frames, I might need 300. Laser turrets, I might need 500, and it's 3 per. So anyway, so 700 times 5 is 3,500 batteries required here. And then the research here is just for rocket. It's focusing on rocket defense. I threw in an extra, some miscellaneous, some armor. You can take out the 700. Anyway, you throw all this together, and I came up with about 10,000 batteries needed throughout the course of a game. And the battery count is pretty variable because you can build way more or way less accumulators and robot frames, etc. When we get down to red circuits, though, if you look at these numbers, production 3 modules, you need 50 of those to make rocket defense. And each one requires 190 red circuits to build. So you need 10,000 red circuits just for production 3 modules that go into rocket defense. And for the speed 3 modules, you need 7,750. So you're looking at over 15,000 red circuits just for modules. And then if you get into the research here, that's another 4,000. So down here you can see, so we said 10,000 batteries, and I was running with 25,000 red circuits is what I finally decided on. But that's how these charts, I just wanted to give you some visual as to where I come up with the numbers that I use over here. So here I said batteries, you might need about 10,000 batteries. 2 chemical plants can make 1,800 batteries per hour running at, full speed. So it would take 2 battery plants 5.6 hours, running at full speed to make 10,000 batteries. Think about that. That's a long time of just full speed production to make 10,000 batteries. And again, this number is more variable than the red circuits. Red circuits, you might need 25,000 throughout the course of a game. 12 blue assembly machines can make 4,000 advanced circuits per hour. So it would take 12 blue assembly machines running at full speed 6.2 hours to make 25,000 advanced circuits. And so that's what I ran with my recommended build. We'll see later. We ran with 2 chemical plants and 12 blue assembly machines for advanced circuits. That's what we're focusing on, so that we can pump out all the batteries and advanced circuits we need in just right around 6 hours. Next topic we're going to get into is buffers and planning. We got a bit of a video clip here that we're going to get into. And then we'll discuss what was in that in just a second. Let's get into the video clip. The point of this clip is going to be to show you, first we're going to look at a bad build, and then we're going to look to see how we sort of correct that. And the reason this is a bad build is, if we look here, we have an oil refinery being fed 2 oil per second, which is what we want. Each of these pump jacks are running at 1 per second. We have some heavy oil storage, some light oil cracking going on, but our petroleum, if we look here, our petroleum is being fed into our plastic plant, and after it reaches the plastic plant, it then gets pulled over to the sulfur plant. And what's happening is we have plastic production, but we have no battery production. That is because our plastic plant, running at full speed, is taking all the petroleum, and the sulfur plant's not getting any. Now, if we just feed the sulfur plant first, it's not going to change anything, because if we look at the speeds here, the plastic plant uses 3 petroleum per second. The sulfur plant also uses 3 petroleum per second. So they're going to use petroleum at the same rate. So let's go and look at another build and see how we control the rate at which one of these plants uses petroleum. So right here we have the exact same build. One refinery, 2 oil per second, heavy being stored, light being cracked. Now we're feeding our sulfur plant first and our plastic plant second. And if we look here, we'll see we do have battery production and we do have red circuit production. So both of these plants are operating. The key difference here is, if we look at our sulfur plant, it's not running right now. It's going to run in a second. There it goes. And then it builds back up to 50. And then stops. Okay? So what's happening is the rate at which this chemical plant is consuming petroleum gas is being limited by the number of battery plants we have drawing sulfuric acid, because the sulfur gets made into sulfuric acid, and the sulfuric acid also is not being buffered. If we pulled the sulfuric acid off into an external storage tank like we did here, or if we pulled the sulfur off into external storage like a crate, then this plant would be allowed to run at full speed, and it would use all of our petroleum. But since we're not buffering anything except the batteries, then the rate at which the battery plant is consuming sulfuric acid is controlling the rate at which the sulfur plant is consuming petroleum, which means we have leftover petroleum being fed to our plastic plant. So I like this setup. You could reverse it and control the rate at which plastic's being consumed by the number of red circuit factories you're building, but I like to use every drop of plastic I get to build red circuits, because as we saw before in the presentation, the buffers we're interested in are red circuits and batteries. We're not really interested in keeping a big buffer of plastic. We're not interested in keeping a big buffer of sulfur or sulfuric acid. So this build works well, and I like it because it effectively splits our petroleum between 2 plants like we want to, and it works, and it gives us the 2 buffers we're interested in, batteries and red circuits. So that's just, keep in mind, keep in mind the order in which you're feeding your plants petroleum, and which buffers do you want versus which buffers do you want to avoid. In this case, we want buffers for batteries and red circuits. A buffer for plastic wouldn't be horrible here, and I even have a box for it in case something goes wrong and this gets backed up. A buffer for sulfur would be bad, and a buffer for sulfuric acid would be bad. If we buffer either one of these, it starves our plastic plant of petroleum. So in this case, there's two buffers we really want to avoid. There's one buffer that we're neutral on, and then there's two buffers we really want to have, if that makes sense. So that's it for this clip. Let's get back to the presentation. Excuse me. Alright, so good buffers, advanced circuits, and batteries. And the reason we do want to buffer these is they take so long to build, and we need a ton of them throughout the course of the game. Plastic can be a neutral buffer, or it can be a bad buffer. It might starve your battery plant. If we buffer plastic, we might be starving our battery plant of petroleum, and depending on which one you put petroleum into first. I would recommend putting petroleum into your sulfur plant first, just because if you put it into your plastic plant first, it's hard to not buffer plastic sometimes, because you might have to take plastic a long way on transport belts, and that creates a big buffer in itself. So I would recommend feeding your petroleum into your sulfur plant first, and then you have bad buffers. You do not want to buffer sulfur, do not want to buffer sulfuric acid. And your good buffers, you want to buffer your advanced circuits, you want to buffer batteries, and you don't just want to buffer them. Remember, you need like 10,000 batteries throughout the course of a game. You need 25,000 advanced circuits. I would say create a buffer and put, if you're going to limit it, put a limit of like 20,000 on your advanced circuit box. Put a limit of like 10,000, 8,000, 5,000 on your batteries, so that when you're not needing them immediately, you have them storing up, and then when you do need them, they're all sitting there available. If that puts too much of a drain on other things, of course, you can shrink it down. But I would recommend just setting that buffer sky high for advanced circuits especially. Because when you do finally need them, you need them, and you don't want to wait for them. So that's just my recommendation. I would say that if you played through and you put a buffer of 500 green circuits and 500 red circuits into your logistics network, you would be making a much bigger mistake than if you had a limit of 20,000 red circuits and a limit of 0 green circuits. Because the green circuits you can make super fast. I think that if you had 0 buffer for your green circuits and 20,000 buffer on your red circuits, you'd be much better off than if you limited both at 500. That's just my take on it. Alright, some recommended setups. First things first, you've maybe seen this number before. If not, 2 oil per second per refinery. That's what you need to feed into your refineries. So, at least, right? So if you have one refinery, you're going to need like probably 2.4, 2.5 oil per second, so that you have some breathing room while it goes down. Because as you draw oil from pumps, their output goes down over time. So like you need over 2 oil per second per refinery, really. Just keep that in mind. Excuse me. So the recommended setup, I would say, is have 3 refineries set to advanced oil processing, 4 chemical plants cracking light to petroleum. Do whatever you want to with the heavy oil. We don't need it for this recommended setup. That's to give you some leeway with what you want to do with it. And then this can feed 2 battery plants and 1 plastic plant. And then the 1 plastic plant can go on to feed 12 blue assembly machines. So we're going to look at this recommended setup, and we're going to look at 2 other ones. So let's get on into this next clip. In this clip, we're going to be looking at some recommended builds for 1 refinery, 2 refineries, and 3 refineries. And you don't have to copy my building placement exactly. This is just to show you sort of the number of buildings to use for what. And we looked at earlier the order in which they get petroleum. So keep that in mind. You'll see here I'm manually feeding a lot of materials in, so you'll have to figure out the placement of your tracks, etc. But for 1 refinery here, we're pulling the heavy oil off to the side. You can do with this what you want. I stored it for all these builds so that you're free to use it for whatever you want, and you still have a solid build for advanced circuits and batteries. So with 1 refinery, this is not going to give us many resources, but we'll do with it what we can. We're going to have 2 chemical plants cracking light oil to petroleum. The petroleum is fed into the sulfur and plastic plants as we saw before. 1 battery plant controlling the rate that the sulfur plant uses the petroleum. And that's going to give us 1 battery plant running at full speed and 1 plastic plant running at partial speed pretty slowly. It's enough plastic to feed 4 advanced circuit assembly machines. For 2 chemical plants, we're going to have, or 2 refineries, we're going to have 3 chemical plants cracking light to petroleum. That's going to feed into 1 battery plant still. And still 1 plastic plant, but you'll notice it's running much quicker, not full speed, but quicker. And this gives us enough plastic to feed 10 advanced circuit factories or assembly machines. And then finally for 3 refineries, that's going to be 4 chemical plants cracking light to petroleum instead of 3. This time we're going to have 2 chemical plants running at full speed creating batteries, and then 1 chemical plant still making plastic. It's not enough to run at full speed, but it runs almost full speed, and it provides us enough plastic to feed into 13 advanced circuit assembly machines. In my recommended setup numbers, I think I say 12. You can use 12 or 13. 12 is just usually an easier number to build with. So I usually go with, when possible, 3 refineries, 2 battery plants, and then 1 plastic plant feeding 12 assembly machines. But, you can do 13, and it's enough. You'll see it does get plastic down here. It is working. So it is enough to feed 13 assembly machines if you so wish. Looking at the production difference here, this is about 450 circuits versus 340 versus 110. So that's sort of the difference that you'll see there. And that's it. So let's get back to the presentation. Alright, that's the last clip. We have some conclusions, and then we're going to look at the do-it-yourself numbers. So the conclusions here, and I think it's just saying the same thing again. Here's the recommended build. We just looked at this. And here's some numbers about it at the bottom. And then the buffers, we want deep buffers for advanced circuits and batteries. Remember, I would say 20,000, 10,000 deep, not just 500. And do not buffer sulfur, sulfuric acid, or plastic. And then moving on to the do-it-yourself calculations. These are some numbers. Up here at the top you have production. So basic processing refinery gives you 0.8 petroleum per second. Advanced processing 1.1. Advanced processing with cracking the light oil to petroleum makes it jump to 1.7. If you throw in heavy oil cracking, you can see it only jumps from 1.7 to 1.8. That's why I didn't really do anything with the heavy oil. It doesn't make that big of a difference for petroleum, and you can do a lot of other good stuff with it, so I didn't include it. So this 1.7 petroleum per second is the number I was using in my builds. And then for the consumption numbers, battery plants consume 0.75 petroleum per second, and this is how many batteries they yield. Advanced circuit blue machines use 0.28 petroleum per second. So let me pull up a calculator here. So looking at the numbers on the recommended build, we were running with 1.7. That's advanced processing, light oils, fully cracked. So we ran with 3 of these. So I'm going to multiply that by 3. And we were having 5.1 petroleum per second made available. We had 2 battery plants consuming that. So minus 0.75, minus 0.75. That's the 2 battery plants. That leaves us with 3.6 petroleum per second. And all that was going into advanced circuit assembly machines. So I'm going to divide this 3.6 by 0.28, and that should tell us how many blue assembly machines we can feed. And so that recommended build, remember we said we could feed 12 or 13. It really is enough to feed 13, but it's 12.85 is really what you're feeding. So does that make sense? That's how I'm using these numbers. So if you wanted to, if you instead had 5 advanced processing light oil fully cracked, you'd say 1.7 times 5. And if you wanted to feed 3 battery plants, you would say minus 0.75, minus 0.75, minus 0.75. And that leaves you a 6.25, which you can divide by 0.28. And that means you can feed 22 or 23 advanced circuit assembly machines. So anyway, that's the numbers that I used to come up with my builds. So I thought I'd pass those on. And then the one last note down here, 1 battery plant, and 3 advanced circuit blue assembly machines can feed 4 Blue Science blue assembly machines. Just something I thought I might throw in there in case some people were wondering about how does all this fit in with Blue Science. There's some numbers on there. So anyway, this has been my tutorial on oil. I hope you enjoyed it. There's probably going to be some questions. Any questions you have, any numbers you need explained, or any numbers you want to contest and think I might have gotten wrong, just feel free to leave some comments, and I will be glad to answer them. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.